Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, ended a state visit to Slovenia, which resulted in the signing of several accords aimed at strengthening bilateral relations. The Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, Bakhta Mansouri, said in Berlin that Algeria is committed to providing training for UN peacekeeping missions to better protect civilians. As the world is commemorating the Nakba or catastrophe, U.S. President Donald Trump, on a tour to the Gulf region, said that the Gaza Strip should be made into a freedom zone, doubling down on his proposal to displace Palestinians from the territory. The A3+ group, including Algeria, reiterated its commitment to a lasting, inclusive and a peaceful settlement in Yemen. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Thmani. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, wound up Wednesday afternoon a state visit to the Republic of Slovenia, the invitation of his Slovenian counterpart, Nataša Musar. On the last day of his visit, or state visit to the Republic of Slovenia, the President visited a Center for Inventions and Artificial Intelligence in the capital. At this center, one of the main centers of innovation in the capital, the President was shown the latest technological projects, as well as the intelligence systems developed by Slovenia in various fields. The visit by the President to this center is in line with Algeria's move towards a knowledge-based economy and aims to explore opportunities for cooperation in the fields of innovation and artificial intelligence between the two countries. The Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Brahim Boughali, has said from Jakarta, Indonesia, that Algeria has made good governance a strategic choice. Amina Borisha has more in this report.
Speaking of the 19th session of the Conference of the Parliamentary Union of Member States of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Brahim Boughali said that Algeria had made good governance a strategic choice as part of a global vision of reform launched by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, focusing on modernizing the institutions of the state and consolidating transparency and social justice. Referring to the challenges of climate change, economic crisis, food security, and geopolitical conflict, Mr. Boughali stressed that Algeria is convinced there is no alternative to tackling them other than by joining forces, cooperating, and adopting common visions, reinforced by the exchange of experiences in the field of good governance, which will make it possible to establish strong institutions that enjoy the trust of the people. Turning to international issues, Mr. Boughali affirmed Algeria's attachment to its firm positions in favor of the Palestinian cause as the central cause of the Muslim nation, denouncing the international silence in the face of the crimes committed against the Palestinian people. He called in this sense for the unification of ranks. He also expressed Algeria's concern of the escalation of tensions between Pakistan and India, urging both parties to show restraint and ensure that dialogue prevails. Boughali also reaffirmed Algeria's attachment to the principles of non-interference, respect for sovereignty, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts.
As you followed in our top stories, the Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of African Affairs, Bakhta Mansouri, said in Berlin that Algeria is committed to providing training for UN peacekeeping missions in order to improve their performance in the field and better protect civilians. Mr. Sharfi has the details.
Speaking during the proceedings of the United Nations Ministerial Conference on Peacekeeping Operations organized in Berlin, Ms. Mansouri expressed Algeria's commitment to multilateralism and announced 4 pledges to boost peacekeeping readiness, civilian protection, and mission support. She said that Algeria will offer training in humanitarian demining to help peacekeepers and affected communities detect and neutralize landmines, promoting safer environments, and supporting the restoration of basic services.
Humanitarian demining for field resilience and civilian safety. Algeria will offer specialized training in humanitarian demining to support conflict-affected communities and mission personnel operating in environments contaminated by explosive remnants of war. Drawing on national developed expertise, this training will strengthen the capacity to detect, clear and neutralize landmines and exploded ordnances. It will also incorporate risk awareness and community-focused approaches, contributing to safer operating environments and enabling the restoration of essential services.
Mansouri added that Algeria will offer forensic investigation training to help missions document atrocities and support accountability, highlighting Algeria's commitment to justice and human dignity.
Algeria will provide training in forensic investigations with an integrated focus on international humanitarian and human rights law. This module will enhance the ability of mission actors to document atrocities, manage evidence, and support accountability mechanisms, particularly in contexts involving mass atrocities or conflict-related sexual violence. This pledge reflects Algeria's firm convictions that justice, transparency, and the protection of human dignity are core pillars for sustainable peace and mission legitimacy.
Ms. Mansouri stated that Algeria will provide training to protect telecommunications system in peace operations, helping personnel counter cyber threats and safeguard mission communications. She also pledged training in military and emergency medicine to prepare peacekeepers for medical crises in hostile settings. These efforts, implemented through national institutions with UN and regional partners, reflect Algeria's commitment to effective, accountable and forward-looking peacekeeping.
In this context, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres stressed that peacekeeping remains central for the UN's mission, noting that peacekeepers work daily to protect civilians, support ceasefires, and deliver aid in conflict zones, efforts that have cost over 4,400 lives. He underlined the importance of the commitments being made at the conference.
UN peacekeeping operations are a cornerstone of the United Nations. Each and every day, peacekeepers are hard at work in troubled spots around the world, protecting civilians caught in the line of fire, maintaining ceasefires, keeping life-saving humanitarian aid flowing, and building the foundations of peace in countries shattered by conflict. Many have paid the ultimate price over the years, 4,400 in all. Which is why the commitments being made here today and tomorrow are so important.
That was UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. U.S. President Donald Trump today said the Gaza Strip should be made into a freedom zone, doubling down on his proposal to displace Palestinians from the territory just as Israel plans a major offensive and intensifies deadly airstrikes, killing more than 150 people in the past day, including dozens of children. Trump's remarks about Gaza came on the same day the number of Palestinians killed in Israeli attacks in the war on the Gaza Strip surpassed 53,000 people, a third of them children. The Arab League has strongly condemned the Zionist entity for refusing to comply with Security Council resolutions calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and for the immediate and unconditional entry of humanitarian aid. It also condemned its refusal to comply with the International Court of Justice's orders for provisional measures to prevent the crime of genocide. Said Bourazi reports.
In a statement on the 77th anniversary of the Nakba of the Palestinian people, the General Secretariat of the Arab League condemned the Zionist aggressive war against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which has been perpetrated by the Zionists for more than 585 days. The League affirmed that the suffering of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and throughout the occupied Palestinian territories requires all free people in the world world to defend the most just and humane cause according to all standards and laws. The Palestinian people have been subjected to acts of genocide, killing, displacement and expulsion, a process of genocide and liquidation that is shocking to humanity. Millions of Palestinians have been transformed into refugees and internally displaced persons both inside and outside their homeland in the form of the most severe oppression and injustice that no people on earth has faced for centuries. It explained that this anniversary comes amid the ongoing brutal war waged by the Zionist entity against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip for more than 19 months, which has claimed the lives of more than 200,000 people. The entire 2 million residents of the Gaza Strip have been displaced, all necessities of life have been destroyed, humanitarian aid has been blocked, a deadly blockade has been imposed, and there has been a severe shortage of water, medicine and food.
The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni denounced the unjustifiable humanitarian situation in Gaza. Ms. Meloni said or has denounced in a speech delivered before the members of parliament a humanitarian situation more and more dramatic and unjustifiable in Gaza in the grip of a barbaric Israeli aggression. Ms. Meloni reiterated the necessity to respect the international human law in Gaza. She also affirmed that her country is against several choices and they disagreed with the latest proposals of the Israeli occupier and made no hesitation in telling their counterparts. Several NGOs, including Doctors Without Borders, Oxfam and Médecins du Monde, have warned of the risk of mass starvation in the Gaza Strip if the Zionist occupation continues to block food aid access to the Palestinian enclave. Said Bourazi again.
The coordinator of Médecins du Monde France in the Palestinian territories, Mahmoud Islim, called for unrestricted humanitarian corridors and an immediate ceasefire in the war-torn enclave. For her part, the head of Oxfam in the Palestinian territories, Bushra Khalidi, pointed out that the NGO has $2.5 million of humanitarian aid waiting at the Gaza border, adding that this aid would enable almost 1 million people to be fed. After a year and a half of a Zionist genocidal war, the NGOs claim that 90% of the drinking water network is out of use. The inhabitants depend on supplies brought in by NGOs and often have to do with dirty water, which encourages disease. In the same context, Doctors Without Borders (MSF) stated in a press release that the Zionist occupation is creating the conditions for a deliberate humanitarian disaster in the Gaza Strip and is attempting to tie aid in this Palestinian territory to the forced displacement of its inhabitants. The Zionist occupation has imposed a humanitarian blockade on the Gaza Strip since March 2nd. The resulting shortages of food and medicines have worsened an already disastrous situation in the Palestinian territory, despite UN warnings of the risk of famine, which were rejected by the Zionist occupiers. MSF reported that its medical teams on the ground had observed a 32% increase in the number of patients presenting symptoms of malnutrition in the last 2 weeks.
The UN Security Council's A3+ group, including Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone and Guyana, reiterated on Wednesday its commitment to a lasting, inclusive and peaceful settlement of the conflict in Yemen, stressing the importance of respecting sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of the country. More with Masoud Sharfi.
At a Security Council session devoted to the situation in Yemen, speaking on behalf of the A3+, Somalia's representative to the UN, Ambassador Abu Bakr Dahir Osman, said that the A3+ are for a lasting, inclusive and peaceful settlement of the conflict in the country. He urged in this regard all external actors to respect the sovereignty of Yemen and avoid any military escalation.
A3+ reaffirms the importance of Yemen's unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity. A3+ firmly maintains that securing an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza is critical toward a lasting peace throughout the region. The group is concerned about Israeli airstrikes and wider ramification of the Gaza conflict. These actions undermine peace efforts and further destabilize an already fragile situations. We urge all external actors to respect Yemen's sovereignty and refrain from military escalations. We also stress the need to halt any action that risks fueling the conflict in Yemen, which threatens to reverse hard-won gains and deepen the humanitarian crisis. In conclusion, A3 Plus stands firmly behind a peaceful, inclusive, and sustainable resolution to the conflict of Yemen. We urge all parties to act with responsibility and this Council to remain united in support of Yemen's path toward stability and recovery.
The A3 Plus called, in this context, on all Yemeni parties to resume the political process under the auspices of the United Nations, arguing that only a political, inclusive, and negotiated settlement could bring lasting peace to Yemen, noting that more than half of the Yemeni population depends on humanitarian aid. The group said it supports the call for flexible, increased, and predictable funding for the 2025 humanitarian response plan, given the severe malnutrition crisis that this country knows. In this context, he stressed the urgency for the international community to redouble its efforts in support of the recovery in Yemen.
For his part, the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator OCHA, Mr. Tom Fletcher, highlighted the impact of the humanitarian crisis on Yemeni children and on the alarming rates of malnutrition in the country.
Let's be clear, though, that Yemen is not out of the woods. The humanitarian situation is deteriorating, and those most in peril are the country's children. The numbers say it all. Half of Yemen's children, 2.3 million, are malnourished, 600,000 of them severely so. And malnutrition is not just about hunger. It attacks immunity, leaving children vulnerable to deadly infections like pneumonia and diarrhea, both of which are leading causes of child mortality in Yemen. Only 69% of children under 1 year of age are fully immunized. 20% have no vaccines at all, one of the worst rates in the world. And as a result, vaccine-preventable diseases are compounding the humanitarian crisis. Cholera, measles cases are rising.
That was the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator OCHA, Mr. Tom Fletcher. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Stay tuned.
The foundational events of the Nakba took place during and shortly after the 1948 Palestine War, including 78% of mandatory Palestine being declared as Israel, the expulsion of 800,000 Palestinians, the related depopulation and destruction of over 500 Palestinian villages by Zionist armed forces, and subsequent geographical erasure, the denial of the Palestinian right of return, the creation of permanent Palestinian refugees, and the shattering of Palestinian society. The expulsion of the Palestinians has since been described as an ethnic cleansing. Before the Nakba, Palestine was a multi-ethnic and multicultural society. However, the conflict between Arabs and Jews intensified in the 1930s with the increase of Jewish immigration driven by persecution in Europe and with the Zionist movement aiming to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. In November 1947, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution partitioning Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with the holy city of Al-Quds under a UN administration. The Arab world rejected the plan, arguing that it was unfair and violated the UN Charter. Jewish militias launched attacks against Palestinian villages, forcing thousands to flee. The situation escalated into a full-blown war in 1948 with the end of the British mandate and the departure of British forces, the declaration of independence of the State of Israel, and the entry of neighboring Arab armies. The newly established Zionist forces launched a major offensive. The result of the war was the permanent displacement of more than half of the Palestinian population. In 1948, 1.4 million Palestinians lived in 1,300 Palestinian towns and villages. More than 800,000 of the population were driven out of their homeland to the West Bank and Gaza Strip, neighboring Arab countries and other countries of the world. As early as December 1948, the UN General Assembly called for refugee return, property restitution and compensation. Resolution 194. However, 75 years later, despite countless UN resolutions, the rights of the Palestinians continue to be denied. According to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, more than 5 million Palestine refugees are scattered throughout the Middle East. Today, Palestinians continue to be dispossessed and displaced by Jewish settlements, evictions, land confiscation, and home demolitions. The Nakba anniversary is a reminder not only of those tragic events of 1948, but of the ongoing injustice suffered by the Palestinians. The Nakba had a profound impact on the Palestinian people who lost their homes, their land and their way of life. It remains a deeply traumatic event in their collective memory and continues to shape their struggle for justice and for their right to return to their homes. In 2022, the UN General Assembly requested that this anniversary be commemorated on 15th May 2023 for the first time in the history of the United Nations. According to hundreds of Palestinian, Arab, Israeli and Western sources, both written and oral, Zionist forces committed dozens of massacres against Palestinians during what was called the 1948 war. Some of these are well known and have been published, while others are not. Well before the 1948 war, the Zionist terrorist organizations perpetrated horrible massacres against Palestinian civilians. Below are the details of some of the most notorious massacres committed at the hands of Zionist terrorist organizations. The El-Quds massacre on October 1st, 1937. A member of the Irgun Zionist terrorist organization detonated a bomb in the vegetable market near the Damascus Gate in El-Quds, killing dozens of Palestinian civilians and wounding many others. The Haifa massacre on March 6, 1937, paramilitaries from the Irgun and Lehi Zionist groups bombed the market in Haifa, killing 18 Palestinian civilians and wounding 38. The Bab el-Sheikh massacre on June 12, 1939, the paramilitaries of the Haganah Zionist organization raided the city of Balad el-Sheikh, capturing 5 residents who they then killed. The city of Balad el-Sheikh is a Palestinian city located east of Haifa. The El Abbasiyah massacre on December 13, 1947, a group of members of the Irgun Zionist organization disguised as British soldiers attacked the village of El Abbasiyah and opened fire on its residents sitting outside the village cafe. They also bombed a number of their homes and planted several time bombs. Moreover, British soldiers surrounded the village and allowed the killers to escape from the northern side of the village. They killed 7 and severely severely wounded 7 others, 2 of whom died later, including a 5-year-old child. The As-Saraya massacre. On January 4, 1948, the Irgun Zionist paramilitaries placed a car full of explosives near As-Saraya in Jaffa, which destroyed all that surrounded it, killed 30 Palestinians and wounded several others. One of the most notorious massacres committed by Zionists against Palestinian civilians is the Deir Yassin massacre on April 9, 1948. A group of 120 from 2 right-wing Zionist organizations attacked the village of Deir Yassin, accompanied by tanks. About 100 to 120 of its residents, a great number of whom were women and children, were massacred. The village was a Palestinian town of about 750 located west of Al-Quds. The Qibya massacre in October 1953. A force of 250 to 300 Zionist soldiers under the leadership of Ariel Sharon launched an assault on the village of Qibya in the West Bank, which was under Jordan's control at the time. This tragic event resulted in the loss of Palestinian civilian lives. Zionist forces used explosives to demolish dozens of buildings throughout the village, leading to the massacre of over 69 Palestinian villagers, with approximately 2/3 of the victims being women and children. The devastating attack also resulted in the destruction of 45 houses, a school and a mosque. The Kafr Qasim massacre in October 1956. The massacre took place on the day the tripartite aggression was launched against Egypt, although the incident's location was considerably distant from the battlefront in the Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula. Border policemen acting on orders from Zionist military commanders carried out the killings. On 29 October 1956, the Israeli government and military decided to enforce a curfew on the Arab villages near the border with Jordan. At 4 p.m. on that day, a border police sergeant informed the mayor of Kafr Qasim that a curfew would be in effect starting at 5 p.m. that evening. This presented a significant challenge as hundreds of villagers who had left their homes in the morning for work had no way of being aware of the curfew until they returned home. Soldiers were instructed that they should shoot to kill at any person seen outside their home after 17 hours, making no distinction between men, women and children. When the villagers returned to their homes after 5 p.m., border police halted them on the western side of the village. Soldiers required them to disembark from their vehicles, cars or bicycles, and began firing at them from close range. In just 1 hour, they ruthlessly killed 49 residents of Kafr Qasim, including children. The Zionist history is replete with events that have raised serious accusations of genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian population, starting with the mass killings and forced displacement of Palestinians in 1948, continuing through over half a century of military occupation, repeated military assaults on Gaza, and official Zionist statements that openly express support for the elimination of Palestinians. The ongoing Zionist onslaught on the civilian population in the Gaza Strip is perhaps the most crying example of Zionist extreme cruelty against Palestinians. In one single airstrike on a hospital in Gaza, 500 defenseless civilians were ruthlessly killed and hundreds injured, including refugees fleeing the bombing of their homes and patients with chronic diseases. This figure puts the number of Palestinians killed since October 7th at more than 3,500 and the injured at more than 12,000.